Meeting? Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience and apologies for the technical difficulties. We're proceeding with the Zoom broadcast. We're doing some troubleshooting with the YouTube broadcast as well. But if the YouTube can't get up and running, we do apologize for that. And we will have a recording of this that we can post later. Again, good morning. My name is Kevin Day. I am Deputy Executive Director of the California Building Standards Commission. I'd like to welcome you to this workshop of the CALGreen Carbon Reduction Collaborative, or CCRC. We do have kind of a packed agenda, and we're hoping to adjourn around noon. So I'll turn it over to my other state agency counterparts for some introductions. In the interest of time, I know we've got a lot of folks on, so we'll probably forego an entire round room introduction just so we can get through the agenda items. But we'd ask that when we go to like public comments for each agenda item, if you like, you can introduce yourself and who you represent at that time. So with that, I'll go to my left, Irina.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Irina Brausman, supervising architect with the Building Standards Commission. Thank you.
Good morning, Tim Freeman, Associate Architect, Building Standards Commission.
And then with DSA.
Good morning again. Thanks for joining everybody. I'm Eric Drever, Principal Architect at Division of the State Architect. I oversee architectural codes and policies. And part of that group is our sustainability group. And to my right.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alicia Chavez. I'm Supervising Architect in the Sustainability Unit.
And joining us remotely is Ida Claire. Ida, do you want to introduce yourself? State Architect.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. So happy to see such a crowd, especially attending on this Zoom. Looking forward to a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ida. And also our Department of Housing and Community Development representatives. Did you want to say good morning?
Sure.
Hi, good morning. Tyler Mayo. I'm the Title 24 Regulations Manager representing the California Department of Housing and Community Development. There's a few of us on. I don't know if we're having technical difficulties, but our Assistant Deputy Director, Mitchell Baker, and then our Housing Section Chief, Jenna Klein, and our Branch Chief, Emily Hill, are all in attendance today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Tyler. And I know we also have our representatives from partner agencies, California Air Resources Board. We've also got folks from the Department of General Services Procurement Division, Bike Lane California Act Program. We really thank everyone for their participation. And yeah, so we'll probably go ahead and get started. But again, if you want to introduce yourself during the public comment portions, that'd be great. So next, I just wanted to provide a recap of how we got here. So the Building Standards Commission, the Division of the State Architect, and the Department of Housing and Community Development convened the CCRC during the 2022 intervening code adoption cycle, holding 4 workshops attended by multiple state agencies and stakeholders representing architects, engineers, building owners, construction material manufacturers, the building industry, standards development organizations, local building officials, labor, utilities, green building advocates, and other industry associations. The resulting proposal contained mandatory embodied carbon reduction building standards, whereby the related community could choose one of 3 pathways for compliance: building reuse, the prescriptive pathway via environmentally preferable declarations, or the performance pathway via whole building life cycle assessment. The proposals were heard by the Green Code Advisory Committee in February 2023, during which the committee recommended the Building Standards Commission reduce the scope of the regulations to buildings 100,000 square feet and larger until January 1st, 2026, at which point the scope would expand to buildings 50,000 square feet and larger, consistent with buildings under DSA's authority, K-12 public schools, community colleges, central services buildings. The proposals then went out for 45 and 15-day public comment periods in May and June of 2023, after which additional revisions were made before they were finalized. Just a side note, some of the comments we received during that formal public comment period talked about lowering the 175% threshold for carbon limits, which we're going to discuss a little bit later on the agenda. BSC and DSA then proposed their embodied carbon CALGreen regulations for adoption and were approved by the commission in August of 2023, filed with the Secretary of State, and were incorporated into the 2022 CALGreen Intervening Code Supplement, which became effective July 1st, 2024. Following their adoption by the commission, BSC received feedback from the California building officials, CalBO, and other CCRC members on updates to the 2022 CALGreen Supplement, CALGreen Guide Supplement Non-Residential relative to the embodied carbon regulations. For example, intent language, compliance method, enforcement, example scenarios. This guide was published on the BSC website in May 2024, along with a summary of CALGreen code updates. Since this time, BSC and DSA have also presented updates on the embodied carbon regulations during regular meetings of CalBO, Green Technology, ICC regional chapters, with CSG consultants, county building officials, the U.S. General Services Administration, the U.S. Department of Energy, ASHRAE, ETCC, and representatives from the states of Georgia, Washington, and the countries of Australia, Denmark, and Japan. BSC and DSA also worked with the California Energy Codes and Standards statewide utility program to publish resources on its new website, www.calgreeninfo.com. I believe I saw Dave Entner on, and we really appreciate his team's help again with that website, which we'll look at shortly. And so with that, the next agenda item is to take a look at the CCRC charter, which we'll share on the screen, but I'll just pause and see if we have any comments from the group, from the public. Any hands raised, Laura?
No one has their hand raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. So during the development of the CCRC regulations in the 2022 intervening cycle, BSC, DSA, and HCD developed a charter. This was kind of an ongoing, a living document, and we just wanted to kind of take a quick look at it. We're not going to do a thorough, exhaustive review of it. We just wanted to kind of touch on some of the key points. But we would invite this group to review it at length, and if there's any suggested edits, or if there are any organizations that would like to be added to the charter, you can go ahead and contact us and we can revise accordingly. So yeah, Laura, would you be able to share that on the screen for the group? Hopefully everyone can see that okay. Yeah, maybe make it a little bit bigger and we can probably do show no markups. And while Laura's doing that, just some kind of quick summaries. The charter talks about the different authorities of the Building Standards Commission, the Division of the State Architect, and HCD. Just to quickly summarize that, the Building Standards Commission's authority for green building standards under the embodied carbon regulations applies to most non-residential buildings, not regulated by another state agency. Yeah, and Laura, if you want to scroll down just a little bit. There we go, yeah. The Division of the State Architect has CALGreen authority for K through 12 public schools, community colleges, and essential services buildings. And then, of course, HCD has CALGreen authority for all residential occupancies. And, you know, again, the intent of the CCRC when it was first formed was to make this a collaborative process. So we really appreciate everyone's help and participation and suggestions as we move forward. There were many state agencies and non-governmental organizations included in the list. Laura, could we scroll down to look at the member organizations? There we go. A little bit, yeah, a little bit further down. Yeah.
State agencies.
Okay, so yeah, there's our list of state agencies, and if you scroll down a little bit further, you can see we have many participants from the private sector. So again, we encourage everyone to review this. It is posted on the Building Standards Commission website. We can provide copies if anyone would like. But if you would like to be added to this list to kind of memorialize your participation, we'd be happy to. Again, we're going to treat this as a living document similar to what we did in the 2022 intervening cycle. And we can revisit it during each workshop during the current 2025 intervening cycle. So I'll go ahead and pause there and see if anyone has any comments on the charter.
No hands raised.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Okay, so we can unshare them. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so for the next agenda item 4, report out from industry stakeholders. One of the items we wanted to touch on here and kind of turn it over to the larger group is, again, these regulations have been in effect since July 1st of 2024. And we wanted to hear if any folks have worked on any projects that fall under the scope of these regulations and kind of hear their experience, whether it's any hurdles, costs, gaps, this is where we can really use your help. So again, I'd like to turn it over to the group, whether it's a school project that falls under DSA's scope, or if it's a non-residential building, 100,000 square feet and over. We welcome any comments from the public there.
First hand raised is IOS Corp. Go ahead and unmute yourself and turn on your camera.
Yes, and sorry, I'm not able to turn on my camera right now. And sorry, I will change my name. I didn't realize. My name is John Hart. I'm with the PowerFlex. We install solar, battery, and EV chargers at non-residential and multifamily sites. We have been able to install both solar storage and EV chargers under the new codes that went into effect last year. Many of the codes have been very helpful, I feel like, in allowing us to install the types of projects that we do. There are a few code changes that went into effect, especially on the multifamily, so with the HCD side, that impact electric vehicle charging that has been difficult for us to install the types of projects that we do. This has to do with requiring that each individual stall is hardwired to a tenant's electrical panel.
John, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just a quick point of order. The purpose of this workshop is to discuss the specific embodied carbon reduction regulations that BSC and DSA promulgated in the intervening cycle. The 3 pathways: the building reuse, the whole building life cycle assessment, the prescriptive, and the performance. So it's not to cover electric vehicle charging or solar for multifamily. So did you have any comments on any projects that fell under the embodied carbon reduction regulations?
No, sorry, I didn't. I guess I misunderstood. I thought under CALGreen that would cover also the other parts. I do, however, have one other comment. And I'm sorry, it's slightly off base of what you're asking for, but just want to raise the point that legislation being proposed, and I'm sorry, I don't have the bill number in front of me right now, would put California building codes, CALGreen, on hold for the next 6 years. We see that as a big issue, wanted to at least raise that to the agencies and ask where possible to get support in, I guess, pushing against this so that our codes do not go on hold for the next 6 years. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you so much, John. And yeah, we are aware of proposed legislation that is moving through the legislative process. We unfortunately can't really speak to it at this juncture. So we're going to, kind of power on through the agenda, but we appreciate your comments. Thank you. Any other commenters with examples of projects that they have worked on since these embodied carbon regulations went into effect July 1st?
Bob Raymer has his hand raised next.
Oh, great. Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, Kevin. Good to see everybody. This is Bob Raymer with the California Building Industry Association, the California Apartment Association, Building Owners and Managers, and the California Business Properties Association. And for sake of time, that'll be the last time I introduce all four of those. We have not seen any under the 100,000 square foot threshold yet. We do anticipate to see application of the LCA when we hit the 50,000 square foot threshold on January 1st, 2026. I would like to extend our thanks to BSC in their efforts to get education and training out there, especially to Calbo. That was one of our big concerns last time, and it's good to see that happening. And why I don't want to dive into it, regarding pending legislation out there, the fact that a bill gets introduced in one form is no assurance that that's what it's going to look like at the end of the cycle. And we're going to be working with all sorts of other people to perhaps develop a more considerate way of dealing with things. I know that this is a big issue with the LA fires, but that's about as far as I want to go into it. But there's going to be a lot of work done on that bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. We appreciate that.
The next hand raised is Wes Sullins.
Oh, okay. Good morning, Wes. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you all for having this meeting. I'm in transit, so I can't be on camera. But so I work at U.S. Green Building Council at headquarters, but I live here in the Bay Area, member of the Code Advisory Committee for the state for CALGreen. So good to have all this meeting. I don't work directly on projects, but we do get inquiries. And I've had a handful from project teams that are now subject to this new code requirement. And what they've asked for is an alternative compliance path in LEED for the whole building LCA credits we have, because they're doing this work and they want to have recognition without having to do something different for LEED. And so what I've been seeing essentially is that project teams that are especially large projects that are doing a whole building LCA are essentially following the LEED requirements and then asking for some streamlining in our review on projects because of that. So that's kind of what I'm seeing as implementation on, I guess, those projects that pursue the whole building LCA path, is they are following LEED's guidelines, which was kind of the intent. I think a lot of the requirements as written were meant to be pretty similar. So I just wanted to share that. Haven't seen too many projects come through, but that is something I've heard from those large ones. The other pathways, of course, for EPDs, we have not interfaced with because there's not as much overlap with our rating system. Thank you.
Understood. Very helpful. Thank you so much, Wes. And we'll continue to look at the connection between the LEED guidelines for whole building life cycle assessment as they relate to that pathway. Thank you.
The next hand raised is Alexa Reiner.
Hi, I'm the sustainability lead for Quattropiquoc Architects, and we do K-12 schools pretty much exclusively. So we work with DSA pretty much exclusively. And a couple of the questions that have come up that we're still wondering about is how the 50,000 square foot threshold is handled with increment projects with different phases with different square footage, whether that's cumulative across all increments or whether it's just one increment at a time. And the other question I have is about how construction phase oversight would work with this, because we have forms that say that we're submitting forms that report what our LCA outcomes were, but then there's language on those forms that says that we're expected to ensure that that happens during construction, but it's unclear how that's going to be enforced and what documentation or proof we would need to provide to demonstrate that.
Thank you, Alexa. I'll go ahead and respond on behalf of DSA. Thank you for the input. We do have a sustainability team. Alicia supervises that, and I would encourage you if you have specific project questions, certainly reach out to the regional managers, who will then potentially reach out to headquarters, and we can maybe answer some of those questions for you. But in the context of this meeting, I appreciate the call for clarity.
Raised.
And Laura, I forgot to ask, has anyone called in on the line?
There are no phone guests.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about going to the phone line until, we'll just monitor for that. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so if there's no hands raised there, we appreciate those comments and may circle back with,
Oh, another hand went up.
okay.
Maya?
Hi, Maya White-Ture. I'm an architect with Grew and Associates. We've had a few projects that have had to comply with this new embodied carbon standard and haven't had any difficulty. It might be nice to streamline the process a little bit so that there's a global warming potential GWP max that we're having to meet, just like a single number instead of a reduction from a baseline, or offer that as an alternative compliance standard. Just something to think about, but actually doing the work, there's been a lot of training from the AIA and we haven't had an issue with that. One thing, it would be nice to have it be easier than the code to reuse certain materials like lumber. Right now, it has to be graded, and there are other states where you can reuse lumber in good condition without having it regraded. So they're just like little things in the code that could help us to reuse materials and help to meet those embodied carbon standards that you guys are setting. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Maya. We appreciate that. And like I said before, we may reach out separately or ask folks to submit some of this information in writing. It would be incredibly helpful to kind of circle back and discuss things like maybe where those projects are and just some more details about those suggestions. So thank you. We appreciate that.
And there's another hand raised, Raisa Saif.
Hi, thanks for setting this up. I'm Raisa Saif, and I'm a sustainability specialist at HGA Architects and Engineers based out of San Francisco. We have a lot of projects that are, healthcare and also, medical office buildings and that are renovation projects. And so one of the things that we're trying to understand better is when does the scope trigger this requirement of embodied carbon reduction? One of the projects we're working on is really, like I said, a TI renovation scope. The core and shell was done by another architect. And so we are just wondering if, because our scope does not include building enclosure components, its primary and secondary structural members. We're just wondering if the requirement of this embodied carbon reduction will be required in a TI project such as this one.
Thank you, Raisa. And so just for clarification, currently the embodied carbon regulations apply to public schools, community colleges, and then for BSC, most non-residential occupancies. However, health facilities like hospitals, skilled nursing facilities are regulated by the Office of Statewide Hospital Planning and Development, which currently doesn't enforce the embodied carbon regulations. We will work with our partners at OSHPOD for possible clarification, because I know some of their health facilities like clinics, that are enforced, where OSHPOD's not the enforcement authority, to kind of see how the scope of those occupancies might apply. So we can certainly work with OSHPOD to kind of clarify that in the coming cycle. And we would encourage you to reach out to OSHPOD, just to see if that's, if they are the enforcement authority versus the local building department, for some of those questions as well. So thank you.
Thanks for clarifying. Just to follow up to that, if it's not regulated by OSHPOD and if it's regulated like another type of project space that's renovation and does not include building enclosure components, does that still require to comply with this embodied carbon reduction?
Yes, yeah, it does. The threshold is in the scoping section. So as long as the project area is more than what's in the scope, then you need to comply with one of the pathways. Then which pathway you comply with, it's up to you. And some are maybe easier for compliance when you do TI. Some may be more complicated, but the choice is yours.
Understood. Thanks for clarifying. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Serena.
Next hand raised is Rezvan Jorshari.
Yes, thank you for this meeting. So I have a school project. I'm Rezvan Joshai with DSK Architects. We have a school campus remodeling a new building that we will need to provide all these CALGreen requirements. We have existing building that we are remodeling. We have the site, and we have two new buildings, two in the site, but they have different increments and different phasing. So we will have different DSA project numbers. For these specific new buildings projects, we are following this prescriptive path, and we are providing all the requirements in our specifications. We have coordinated with our structural engineer and also with the contractor, and we already received a confirmation from subcontractors that they can provide all these GWP requirements. Is that enough documentation and then providing the signature of the engineering of record? That's my understanding from the requirements. That should be enough to document all the requirements. Just wanted to confirm that.
Thank you for the comment. So certainly there's details behind almost every project, but in general, it seems like you're following the appropriate procedures. I presume perhaps you had a pre-application meeting on the project and maybe have had discussions with the regional office that you're submitting those to. Certainly appropriate to do that as well, and we highly encourage that. But in general, yes, it seems as though you're following the appropriate protocols. Thank you. Appreciate that. I may reach out to you to find out some of the application numbers so that we can at least apprise ourselves of some of these projects. It's one of the reasons for this agenda item. So really appreciate you mentioning it. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Next hand is Ignacio.
Good morning, everybody. Ignacio Valdivia, Sustainability Manager for Holiday Rock Ready Mix Company, Asphalt and Aggregate. We service Southern California with 40 ready mix plants. We've started seeing projects, and the feedback that I have for you is that they're from a ready mix working with the contractor. There's still a lot of confusion. I still get asked like, when was this implemented? You know, what are the square footage requirements? And what's the difference between the prescriptive path and the whole building life cycle assessment? So a lot of education still needs to be done to really for these, the expectation was these large projects should have a robust sustainability team, but still been challenging to educate them. So hopefully as we progress, we continue to provide feedback to everybody in the, from architects to engineers to all the way down to contractors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignacio. We appreciate that. And again, we may reach out offline to kind of see if there's any areas, of education outreach that we can, kind of increase, to kind of help those folks out. So we appreciate that.
Can I maybe?
Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
I'll add to Kevin's comments. Part of this, as you may have seen, the NRMCA is part of this collaborative process. They were actually very active and very helpful throughout the process. So you might also additionally reach out to them. I know they've had articles in various periodicals that they've written specific to concrete and aggregates, and actually more cement mixes or cement alternatives. So highly suggest you reach out to them. But certainly we will continue our education and outreach and look to expand that. Thank you for the comment.
Appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Next hand is Michael Malinowski.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of the American Institute of Architects, California. Our members are the design professionals who shape California's built environment, and our 11,000 members are quick to let us know if they have difficulties or problems with code change or requirements, especially those that we are active in shaping. And I can tell you that we've rolled out, as was noted, a lot of educational materials. We've assisted the state agencies in developing the guides that are available to code officials and others. And we believe that the rollout is going smoothly. It's been real-time live now for some 9 months, and we're very pleased with how the industry is taking this on. It's been smooth. We believe the approach we've used has been measured and careful in trying not to disrupt things, and we've been successful in that. And we're very encouraged about that and looking forward to further progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, and we do appreciate yours and AIA's help with the education outreach. Thank you.
Next hand raised is Hank Kaplan.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much for this time. My name is Hank Kaplan. I'm the Scope 3 Emissions Manager with the California State University Chancellor's Office. So we represent and oversee the 23 CSUs in the state. I'm relatively new to this space and really to this role, but I did want to sort of raise I don't even want to call it a concern, but sort of what I've been finding in this first sort of few months in my role is that these requirements for the CSU as our own authority having jurisdiction and something of a state agency when it comes to the BICLEAN requirements, that there does seem to be some duplication here in terms of submitting to DGS EPDs on our projects, and then for these that are 100,000 square feet or more, also conducting either a life cycle assessment or going through the prescriptive pathway. And I just wonder if there's an avenue in the code to sort of signpost more clearly for agencies like ours, which regulation applies, or a way to sort of streamline any discrepancies between those two regulations, particularly in light of also CARB's embodied carbon regulations that'll come down the pike. Just wanted to sort of raise the concern that we have that it does seem to be a little bit of duplication of efforts, and therefore a little bit more outreach and education is required from our end with campuses and their project teams.
Thank you so much, Hank. We appreciate that. And yeah, we can definitely circle back and coordinate with the CSU Chancellor's Office and our partners at DGS to kind of identify those points of duplication to see if we can help clarify or streamline that process and do some further education. So thank you.
Hank, do you mind if I ask a clarifying question? And this is just to be clear, this is outside of DSA authority, but I do have experience within DGS. Are you talking about the procurement requirements associated to BICLEAN California as a duplication to the building code requirements?
Correct. So the procurement process and the submittal of EPDs to DGS through BICLEAN, it seems to me like we're submitting documentation to one agency when we already have to do the same for sort of code requirements, right? It's just an extra step and requires us to sort of inform the project teams like, hey, make sure you check both boxes, when it's, ultimately the goals of both programs and regulations are the same.
So I would presume that the prescriptive path in CALGreen really would be the choice of the Chancellor's Office, and don't want to make that choice for you certainly, but I would presume you'd use the prescriptive path, which if you're submitting for BICLEAN California automatically would meet the requirements of CALGreen, with the exception of perhaps of concrete.
Right, without the exception of concrete for sure. That said, we do want to leave the flexibility open to campuses to pursue an LCA approach, in which case it would be a little bit extra effort, if you will. But yeah, I would appreciate some maybe time to speak offline with the group and really hammer out some of these particular concerns. I don't want to monopolize time here with what might be a kind of niche issue.
Thank you for letting me step in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks again, Hank. Absolutely.
Next hand raised is Casey Castor.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for pulling this together this morning. Casey Castor, Director of Sustainability.
If you can speak up, please, sir. We're having a hard time hearing you.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, good morning. Thank you for
setting this up this morning. My name is Casey Castor, Director of Sustainability with Practice Architects in Pasadena. I'm also the Vice Chair of the Committee on the Environment for the AIA LA chapter, and just very pleased that these regulations have come into place. We are happy with the 3 different approaches that are offered under this CALGreen approach, and specifically we are currently working on the LCA in the whole building life cycle assessment, the performance method for the Inglewood High School. Right now, it's about 117,000 square feet. So we're looking to put the submission into DSA within the next 2 weeks. So excited to kind of see what kind of commentary back and review process is on the whole building life cycle assessment, as well as the prescriptive path. We're kind of interested in pursuing both to get a better understanding of how the process works for future projects, but also just to see how the Buy Clean California standards would be with the EPDs and the specific material requirements. So ultimately, I'll just wanted to jump on and say thank you for putting this together, and happy that these have come into place. With the whole building life cycle assessment, there's still kind of changes that are happening as far as defining baselines and being able to get the specific data that's out there, whether it's from Carbon Leadership Forum or other groups, or a specific project-based baseline. But excited to see how that kind of progresses in the coming months as more of that data is released. So just wanted to say thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Casey.
There are no other hands raised.
Okay, great. Thank you, Laura, and thanks again, everyone, for your comments. This is exactly what we're looking for. We may reach out to several of you offline after this meeting, but we encourage you again to, if you've got some specific comments or questions, to send those in to BSC and or DSA, and we can keep that dialogue going. So thank you very much. Okay, so kind of moving on to in the agenda. We were going to take just a quick moment. Again, like I mentioned in the introduction, we worked with the statewide utility codes and standards team that had developed the energy code. Ooh. Sorry, one moment. Thanks. We worked with the statewide utility codes and standards team that had developed the Energy Code ACE website to develop a similar resource website for embodied carbon, for the embodied carbon reduction, and really all of CALGreen, but kind of with a specific focus on embodied carbon. And Dave Intner and others really helped us out with that. And it's I think it's a pretty good repository and a great start for resources that may help with that. So in just a moment, Laura, can we share the CalGreeninfo.com website?
Oh, sure. Give me a second to pull that up.
Okay. Yeah, we were just going to take a quick look, and I was just going to do a quick search for embodied carbon reduction because I did that last night and a bunch of resources came up, and we can just take some comments from the public. And while Laura's bringing that up, one thing we want to mention is if Mr. Malinowski mentioned a lot of the trainings and the education outreach that AIA had facilitated. We know that some of our other public and private folks on the both on the charter and elsewhere have administered trainings and have PowerPoint presentations and guidance documents. We wanted to have them all in kind of one place, and that's where this CalGreeninfo.com website kind of came in handy. We also linked to it from our respective websites, BSC and DSA. So we could take a quick look at that. And if there's anything out there that has helped with your projects, like some of the folks that we've heard from, that that isn't already here, I think we can work with Dave Intner and his team to add to this repository. So looks like everyone can see this. So Laura, if you, I think if you hit explore and then it just brings up, it should bring up like a search field, I think. Yeah, so when you go down to that search, I just did this last night and just do embodied carbon reduction. And again, this website has resources for all of CalGreen. So it would also have, if you put in a search for like electric vehicle charging, water conservation, sustainable design, it would pull up what resource it is. But as you can see, there's I think, yeah, there's a guidebook, an AIA CALGreen checklist. There's a CALGreen embodied carbon series. So, you know, a lot of this is exactly what we were hoping, is that a lot of resources would come up. And I know Dave's on the line. I don't know if you're available to, you know, yeah, I know you and Misty and your team worked on this a little bit more. And I know that on the left, there's some search parameters where you can drill down and get really specific, but we just wanted to share this resource with the group and see if that's been of help. So I'll turn it over to the group and see if there's any comments or questions about this.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, thanks so much for you know, the opportunity to support the initiative in this way. We, you know, leveraged an existing website platform to launch this sub-site for CALGreen, leveraging the local energy codes website that previously existed for the statewide IOU codes and standards team. So there's a lot of room, I think, for additional resources, additional improvements in functionality. So we certainly welcome, as people use this site more, any relevant feedback that we can look to as we continue to build out the resources to make compliance with the standards easier and more streamlined. So thanks again, and any feedback is welcome either through this forum or directly through the website.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. We really appreciate all your hard work on this, you and your team. Thank you.
And Michael Malinowski.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate Kevin, you bringing forward the incredible work the Codes and Standards team and that Dave Ettner's led in getting all this information in one place. Our 11,000 members have provided really positive feedback, and we're really looking forward as this continues to accumulate additional information as we move forward. This is an incredible resource that really makes it easier for all the state agencies as well as the private sector to find everything in one place. And again, just echoing your compliments to the team that's made this happen.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael.
There are no other hands raised.
Okay.
Stop sharing, sir.
Yes, thank you. So again, you know, we encourage folks to check out www.calgreeninfo.com, do some searches, you know, explore the resources there. And again, if there's anything that you have that you've been using for training or presentations, guidance, that you'd like to share on that platform, you know, you can certainly send it to us or directly to Dave, I believe, you know, to see if we can get it up there, to just have a one-stop shop for resources. So thank you. Okay. One of the other things that we wanted to talk about that I mentioned in the introduction is when a new edition of CALGreen is developed. With every new edition, the Building Standards Commission works on a guide that kind of helps provide you know, intent language, ways for compliance, you know, different scenarios. So we did this for the when the embodied carbon regulations were first adopted in the 2022 intervening cycle. Once that supplement was published, we then did a guide to the supplement and provided some information there. And we're now working on the guide to the 2025 edition of CALGreen, which will be the code itself will be published July 1st of this year, and we hope to have the CALGreen guide published shortly after that. So we're, you know, always looking for feedback on that, and we did get some good feedback and assistance from California building officials and others on that first guidance document. So Laura, I don't think we need to open the guide, but I just kind of want to show everybody where it is. Can we go to just our website, the Building Standards Commission website, and the CALGreen webpage? Right, so if everyone can see this from the CALGreen webpage, if you scroll down, Laura. So we've got links to each edition of CALGreen going back to 2016, and then further below that, you can see the CALGreen guides. Laura's expanding that. And then, yeah, you can see all the different guides, both for each triennial edition of CALGreen, and then we do a supplement guide when we do the intervening code supplements. And we've also got some other resources on here. We recently did a summary of the CALGreen code updates that were effective July 1st. And then I think we also have, let's see, yeah, there we go, the checklists and worksheets. So we did develop some additional worksheets that assist with compliance for the embodied carbon regulations. I think it's worksheet, is it 9?
Yes.
Okay. So most of the worksheets are available to download directly from this page. So I think if you scroll down a little bit more, yeah, so you can see, let's see.
Oh, here.
Yeah, so you can see worksheets 5, okay, it goes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, you know, if there's any comments or questions about these worksheets, or if you just need them, you can email the Building Standards Commission, and we can provide those. And yeah, I'll turn it back over to the group if there's any comments or questions about the CALGreen guide or these worksheets. Any hands raised?
No hand. Oh, there's a hand. Ignacio.
Just a quick question. I'm new to this group. So is there like a contact list of like, yeah, is there a contact list?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ignacio. Want to bounce over there?
Oh, sure.
Oh, sorry. Laura's going to bring it up in a moment, but if you are at the Building Standards Commission website, you'll see a bunch of tabs at the top. If you clicked the contact tab, that'll not only bring up all the Building Standards Commission's contact information, but there's also a button where you can get added to the Building Standards Commission's mailing list. And that way you can get notified of all of our workshops, our commission meetings, you'll get information bulletins, our quarterly newsletter, and any and all things CVSC related. Here we go.
There's also the state agency contact list, which has contacts for the other state agencies as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Laura. And that would include the Division of the State Architects. So that'll take you over to DSA's website. And I believe they have a similar listserv that you can get added to as well for CALGreen and other updates. Sweet.
Great, thank you so
It's
much.
the bottom of our main page.
Yeah. Thanks again, Ignacio. Any other comments or questions about the CALGreen guide or the CALGreen worksheets for the embodied carbon regulations?
No
hands raised?
No hands raised.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so moving on through the agenda. All right, so the next, we're on to agenda item 5, possible CCRC proposals. We have a few kind of minor items that we'd like to talk about. The first is the Building Standards Commission did receive some comments, and I believe we put some information in our CALGreen guide about this, but we are proposing some cleanup items in the worksheets for units of measurement. Laura, are you able to bring up the express terms?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then I'll turn it over to Arena and Tim to briefly summarize these.
Are you okay with the size of that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Laura, scroll down to item 1.
Okay.
Right there.
Good.
Tim, do you want?
Sure. Yeah, so as Kevin had said, these express terms and items that we're cleaning up are correcting errors in a couple of the numbers and aligning better with both BCCA and DSA's language. So item 1 is section 5.105.1 for the scope of the regulations, and simply corrects the language to change the 100,000 square foot compliance requirement to 50,000 square foot.
Yeah, basically, the code becomes effective with 50,000 soon, and this language about 100,000 becomes obsolete. So we are cleaning this and kind of aligning our scope section with DSA. Currently, we have 2 scope sections, one for BSC and one for DSA, because thresholds are different. And with this cleanup, we'll get realigned again with 50,000 square foot applicable to both. So there is no regulatory effect in this, it's simply cleanup. And next.
Item 2. please.
Okay.
And this is section 5.409.1 as well, and basically does the same thing, cleans up the language from 100,000 square foot to 50,000 square foot. Item 3, Laura. Item 3 is table 5.409.3 for products global warming potential limits. There was a unit of measurement for the flat glass, which was volumetric and not planar. So we're correcting that unit of measurement. Item 4, please. So this gets into the worksheets that Kevin had mentioned. This is worksheet 5 and revises some of the language to more accurately attest of what the design professional is, the information that they're providing. Irene, you want to elaborate?
Yeah, so what happened here is originally when all those worksheets were added to CALGreen, there in worksheet 5 and I think 8, those about prescriptive pathway, there were mentions about percentages in global warming potential that's required to be provided. But percentages supposed to be in the second pathway about whole building life cycle assessment. And the prescriptive path is about compliance with limits set in a table. So this fix aligns the declaration statement with the regulations more closely. So to avoid any possible confusion about the statement. So, and currently on the screen, you see how it would be in express terms with cross out, underline, and all those things. And Laura, if you can scroll down a little. So here is the language, how it will be if the change got approved and adopted. So that you can just look at that and see if it makes more sense. And we appreciate any feedback that you can give us, because we did our best to make it more aligned, but if you can get us your feedback on it, it's really get a lot cleaner, or if you think it may be improved even more, we'll appreciate that. So yeah, we'll like to work with you. And Laura, if you can go to the next one. So the same thing here, it's just worksheet 5 is for mandatory requirements and worksheet 8 is for voluntary compliance. So again, aligning the declaration statement with regulations and aligning it with worksheet 5. So they are basically the same, with the only differences in compliance section and table numbers and tier 1 and tier 2. So again, we'll appreciate your feedback on the proposed changes. And scroll down a little bit more.
To item 5.
There we go.
Yeah. And here is the same cleanup of unit of measurements that we did for mandatory, and this is for voluntary regulations. So that's the last item of the cleanup that we are going to do during intervening cycle. And I think now we can go back to
Thank you, Irina and Tim. Are there any comments or questions on the cleanup items that we just displayed for everyone? And if you'd rather submit them in writing, to CBSC, Irina and Tim can help with that too.
No hands raised.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that, Laura. I think can we unshare at this point?
Yeah, and also I wanted to thank the group for providing us comments about all those cleanups items before, because they got on the list and they will be cleaned because of your feedback that you provided originally. It took us some time to get the all together and fixed in regulation, but it will be fixed. So when you provide your feedback, it's really appreciated. We'll work with you on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Serena. Okay, before we move on to the next bullet, I'm gonna kind of jump in. We received a couple comments in writing. One of them came in last week from Emily Flynn. I'm gonna summarize that shortly because I don't think Emily could be here. But I also wanted to speak to a comment that Mr. Bob Raymer submitted yesterday. So I'll come to that shortly. But Emily Flynn submitted a comment last week suggesting an addition to section 5.409.2, note number 1, proposing that tangible materials be added to the list of paid embodied carbon software tools. Tangible meets the requirements outlined in this section, aligning with ISO 14044, ISO 21930 /EN 15804, and ISO 21931 /EN 15978. Tangible includes life cycle stages A1 through C4 and calculates embodied carbon using environmental product declarations and BIM-backed material quantities. I don't know if Emily's on. I think she said she wasn't able to participate, but if you are, Emily, and you want to speak to that more, you can. Otherwise, this is something that BSC and DSA will consider and appreciate you submitting that to us.
What is Emily's last name?
Flynn, Flynn.
Here's Emily Flynn.
Okay, yeah, I think she said she couldn't make it. That's why she sent it to us. Okay, so thank you, Emily. And then again, I'm not sure if Bob Raymer is still on the line, but we did get his comments. Bob, I apologize. We were, Stoyan and I were in an all-day training yesterday and we were not able to prepare those for the meeting, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to those. And that's definitely something that we'll, consider throughout the process.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thanks, Kevin, and everyone. Once again, this is Bob Raymer representing the 2 residential and 2 commercial building industry groups. CBIA, of course, was one of many parties to the passage of AB 2446, the bill directing ARB to go forth and look into creating sort of a way in which we can identify and then regulate embodied carbon through recognition of global warming potential, et cetera, et cetera. And as with all pieces of legislation, there were some who were thinking the Holden bill went too far, others who think it didn't go nearly far enough. And one thing became very clear in the process, and that is the vast majority of legislators, as well as the governor, wanted to see some manner adopted for which global warming potential can be identified in building materials. And then once that's done, that there be an ability to regulate, and even in 2446, there's thresholds, basically goals over time that the state is supposed to try and meet. And recognizing that industry took a pragmatic approach, and kind of like what we did with EV charging, industry was successful in getting a couple of guardrails put into the bill, namely what is considered significant cost impact, and number two, what is considered feasible. Now, looking at the Building Standards Commission regs, when you've got a threshold of 100,000 square feet and a reduction mandate of 10%, you're not going to see a lot of significant economic impact. That's something that it kind of goes without saying. But we suspect that as time goes on, that percentage reduction of GWP is going to increase. And as that increases, that may well present a challenge for industry in terms of negative cost impact, and in terms of feasibility, in terms of finding products that basically can comply. And so what we're suggesting is that the Building Standards Commission consider looking at the definitions for feasible and the definition for significant cost impact that is located in Assembly Bill 2446, specifically, hang on just a second here. Yeah, it's Health and Safety Code. Yeah, Health and Safety Code 38561.3. And basically they do a rather extensive job of specifying what is considered feasible. And they also recognize something that goes beyond 5% be significant cost impact. The legislature very rarely gets into defining these types of things, but this was sort of a new and emerging area. And we wanted to make sure that, as time goes on and the regulations get more stringent, that we weren't going to be confronted with something that just wasn't going to work. So with that, all we're doing is suggesting that BSC consider adopting these definitions and basically referencing them as exceptions in chapter or part 11, section 5.409.2. And as I indicated in my email to you, Kevin, what I've suggested to you is incredibly rough and clumsy. Certainly, it does not fit the type of format that we're all very used to with building code regulations, but we just wanted to get the conversation started for that. And simply because we recognize that down the road, that 10% reduction in GWP is probably going to increase. So with that, those are my comments.
Great. Thank you so much, Bob. And again, we'll consider those comments and may circle back with questions and feedback. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Okay, and those, oh, go ahead, Laura.
There's a hand raised.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Hanjiro Ambrose.
Good morning, everyone. I know that we just wanted to jump in, I thought, and perhaps plug our work a little bit. And in response to that comment, it seemed like an appropriate time.
That'd be great. Thank you, Hanjiro, and thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here, and I look forward to continuing to attend these. Obviously, we're excited to participate. in these groups. So my name is Handra Ambrose. I work at the Air Resources Board in our embodied carbon program. A few folks have made mention to Assembly Bills 43 and Assembly Bill 2446, which were adopted in the 21-22 and 2022-23 legislative sessions. CARB is in the process of developing concepts related to a framework for measuring and reducing embodied carbon in the building sector, pursuant to goals outlined in those assembly bills. Folks on the line might be aware that we recently held a workshop related to our proposed or our concepts for an embodied carbon reporting regulation. We held another workshop last September. We're obviously very interested in hearing from folks who are in attendance today and other stakeholders in the building sector on any potential embodied carbon reporting requirements. And obviously we are working and in collaboration with our sister fraternity agencies here, DGS and BSC and Division of State Architect and Housing Community Development on any regulations that we might adopt in the future. So we have our, I'll drop our embodied carbon website into the chat, as well as a link to our listserv. Folks, please do sign up if you're interested. We will be hosting additional public outreach meetings, including hopefully some technical meetings this year related to any proposed reporting requirements. And we look forward to receiving any feedback.
Thank you so much, Hanjiro. Unfortunately, we don't have the chat feature enabled for this type of Zoom meeting, but we encourage everyone to reach out to CARB. They've been doing a lot of great work pursuant to AB 2446 and AB 43 for the embodied carbon reduction framework, and encourage everyone to get on that mailing list. Thanks again, Hanjiro. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to our continued dialogue.
Hanjiro, would you like to state what the website is?
Yeah, I can. I think that probably the easiest way for you to find it is to look for embodied carbon and CARB on Google. You should be able to find it pretty quick. If you go to the ARB's website under Our Work Programs, we have a program page of embodied carbon. You can obviously find our email address on there as well. We have our public comment period open from our recent workshop. So for folks who maybe missed the workshop, we have the presentation materials already posted. We will be posting a recording of the workshop very soon. We have a 30-day public comment period open. And so we do invite folks to please provide written public comments, even if you were unable to visit the workshop or attend the workshop.
Great. Thanks again for that, Hanjiro. We really appreciate it. Okay, and any hands raised? No? Okay. Just a quick time check. I think we can get through one more bullet, and then we might take like a 5 or 10 minute break around like 10:30-ish, if that sounds okay to everybody. With that, the next thing we wanted to talk about is there was some legislation that chaptered last year, Senate Bill 1207, that affected the carbon limits for insulation for the Buy Clean California Act. This is definitely something that affects the embodied carbon reduction regulations. So we wanted to see if there were any comments or feedback, or if, I don't know if Eric, or I know we have some folks that joined us from the Department of General Services Procurement Division that help facilitate the Buy Clean California Act program. If we wanted to speak to that as how it might relate to what we can clean up in, or consider for the next cycle.
Sure, I'll just generally introduce it, but certainly I think our sister agency over within RESD procurement or DGS procurement would be able to speak more completely about it. But they have been actively looking at product category rules to broaden the specific insulation included in Buy Clean California and the CALGreen regulations to consider all insulation pursuant to the bill, SB 1207. And DSA has been active in providing them feedback on what those product category rules might consider. I do not have an update on their specific activities, but perhaps Brendan, if you're able and willing to step in and give a brief update on the fly, I apologize for the late notice, but we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, actually, I'll speak up to that. My name is Scott Fong, and I'm a senior procurement engineer at DGS, and was involved with the Buy Clean California Act. Yeah, so as was noted, SB 1207 changed the eligible material from mineral wool board insulation to the general category of insulation. So the team has been looking into how we're going to expand the subcategories that are going to be affected. Certainly, our strategy of kind of basing it on a common PCR, what the PCR says in the eligible materials under that PCR would be our first start, right? As far as considering other eligible materials. And so we'll be reaching out to probably some of the different trade groups. Have a conversation with NYMA recently. So again, we haven't completed our list of eligible materials just yet, but we'll be working closely with the other state agencies here online, just to just kind of keep them informed and as they're refining this CALGreen regulation.
Great, Scott. Thank you so much for that update, Scott. We really appreciate it, and we'll continue to coordinate with you on those updates. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So it's 10:24, and I think we might be able to get one more bullet through, you think? Okay. So the next thing we wanted to talk about, like I mentioned in the introduction, we did get some public comments last cycle about lowering the 175% threshold. So we would certainly entertain any comments or questions about that proposal from the group. Brandon, Ray, go ahead, please.
Thank you for all your efforts on all this. Just wanted to provide, I guess, a few comments or brief update. I think obviously the bulleted item is referencing Buy Clean adjustment, obviously for concrete, since it's not in Buy Clean. It's references NRMCA's version 3 benchmark report. Just an update there. We are in the process of releasing our V4 report, our V3, which is currently referenced. The Pacific Southwest benchmark region is pretty broad: California, Nevada, and Arizona. The upcoming report, which we went from, I think, about 500 or so plants nationally that contributed to the report, to V4 will be around 1,000 plants or so. And we are looking to parse the regions a little more explicitly to be California specific, as well as even metros within California. So it would be Northern California, like the Bay Area, as a metro region, and then Southern California as another metro region, and then California as a statewide benchmark. So just wanted to give a quick plug that one, that's in the works. The collection effort is actually already completed, but the report is on hold from being released because of the PCR for concrete is currently being updated. We think that will be completed by mid-year, and possibly we would release then our report Q3, probably Q4 of this year. Obviously, it might be too tight on a timeline for this intervening cycle to make any changes or incorporate that, but I did want to at least give you the information of what we're trying to do. We're not opposed to adjusting, obviously, the limiter. I think there's a lot of comments out there about it being almost too easy to achieve, but I think I wanted to say too that I think part of this effort was trying to get familiar with the collection of EPDs and the whole process. And I had a question about if your team was actively collecting these EPDs and the data and doing processing efforts to understand how, you know, projects are coming in terms of the requirements and that type of stuff. So I think that's the bulk of what I had to say.
Thank you so much, Brandon. And we appreciate that update. So the Building Standards Commission, and I don't believe DSA, we're not collecting EPDs or data. That might be something that CARB is working into their AB 2446 effort. I don't want to speak for them, but you know, we're, you know, certainly happy to, you know, receive that information from other stakeholders. But thank you.
And I think as one last side comment, I did note, I didn't want to interject earlier, but NRMCA wasn't listed as a stakeholder on the previous document. Just wanted to add that. And also too, I think we wanted to also connect, and maybe I can reach out to your team separately, but we wanted to connect on resources on the CalGreen info website. I think Eric and team know we've been trying to help combat some issues we've been having with regard to perceived acceptance of different materials like Portland limestone cement or other blended cements, that type of thing. So would appreciate any efforts your team could support us there and point us in the right direction.
Absolutely. We can circle back with you on that, Brandon. Thank you again.
Next hand is Michael Malinowski.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to comment that AIA California is going to have a brief presentation following this item, and we will be touching on this topic during our presentation. So just trying to avoid duplicative comments.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael.
Next hand raised is Webley Bowles.
Hi there, Webley Bowles, WAP Sustainability. I want to say that I support lowering those thresholds to align more closely with Buy Clean California, and it's going to help support some of the issues that have been addressed today. Hank Kaplan mentioned how multiple agencies have to comply with multiple different policies. So I think aligning those more closely, but also working with Brendan Ray and NRMCA to identify what needs to happen with the concrete values is going to be really important, since that is not specifically within the Buy Clean California policy. So I just want to make sure that that's called out specifically as, yes, we need to align, but since that material is not in there, we need to address it a little bit more sensitively. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for those comments and for all your help on the CCRC, Webley. We really appreciate it.
Next hand is Avita.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for your time. My name is Avide. I am with ZGF Architects. I'm a practicing architect, and I just wanted to support the comments previously made about the thresholds for the prescriptive pathway in CalGreen. We have quite a few projects. We work with DGS, we work with the UC system and the Cal State system. And all of these projects coincidentally have to meet Buy Clean California and CalGreen embodied carbon requirements, because they're often over 100,000 square feet. So from the practicing perspective, because Buy Clean California thresholds are so much more stringent, meeting the CalGreen embodied carbon pathway is just it's super easy. We don't even think about it, right? We're already by default meeting tier 2 of the prescriptive requirements in CalGreen, except for concrete. But even in concrete, all of our mixes are typically meeting the industry-wide EPDs. So even for concrete, we'd be meeting that threshold. So just wanted to put that out there as a practice perspective, that aligning those two would really make sense, and it wouldn't be any extra burden on project teams.
Great. Thank you so much, Avita. We appreciate that.
There are no other hands raised.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you so much for all your comments. I think this would be a good time to take a 10-minute break. And when we resume, we will turn it over to Mike Malinowski with AIA for their short presentation. So if it is now 10:32, so we'll come back at 10:42. I'm good, everybody? Okay. All right, we'll see everyone shortly. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's 10:42, so we're going to go ahead and resume with our agenda. Are we back on? Okay. And so the next item, the American Institute of Architects has a presentation that they'd like to share. Okay. I think Laura's gonna, there we go. And then Laura, Michael Malinowski, I believe, is gonna be helping with the presentation. Are they able to share on their end? Okay. Okay, so Michael, if you're back, and the AIA team, we're ready when you are.
We're ready. Thanks, Kevin. My name is Michael Malinowski, here on behalf of the American Institute of Architects, California, and our 11,000 design professional members who shape California's built environment, as well as the many stakeholder collaborators that share our optimism and passion in moving to our sustainable, resilient, and beautiful future. Our thanks to Building Standards, DSA, and HCD for giving us a few minutes to provide a high-level overview of 3 near-term focus areas for embodied carbon progress. These include, number 1, continuing the important work of the CCRC from the last code cycle in making consideration of embodied carbon a part of business as usual for California. We're recommending some advances as well as some foundational work for future code cycles, while continuing to be respectful of the many partners involved in shaping a cost-effective and impactful path forward. Area 2, laying groundwork to further incentivize and embrace the circular economy. We believe that existing buildings and infrastructure represent both our biggest opportunity as well as a challenge that requires thoughtful, measured, and strategic shifts over time. And Area 3 is continuing an effort that started in the last code cycle, which is cleaning up CALGreen to allow us to more focus clearly on the most important areas for future progress. In the interest of time, I'm not going to introduce the dozens of people and organizations that have gathered together, but I will turn it over now for screen sharing to Anish. Please proceed.
Thanks, Mike. And just confirming that everyone can see the presentation. Yes? Great. So my name is Anish Tilak. I am a manager in the Carbon-Free Buildings program at RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute, and I'm presenting on behalf of the working group that AIA California has organized to develop some recommendations for this code cycle. And my section of the presentation will focus on our suggestions for refinements to the embodied carbon measures. So just a quick recap on where we are today. I think folks understand the 3 different pathways that have been placed in the CALGreen code for building reuse, life cycle analysis, and the prescriptive path. Focusing in on our recommended refinements in 2025, we wanted to highlight some of the recommendations that BSC has already presented and some of the planned changes, and express our support and agreement in pursuing these recommendations. So just going through that list, looking to clean up the items and errors in worksheets and units of measurement, looking to bring in the Buy Clean California carbon limits for insulation, improving the GWP thresholds to bring CCRC closer to the Buy Clean California levels, and then reducing the trigger threshold for non-residential buildings from 100,000 square feet to 50,000 square feet. So firstly, just wanted to say that we agree with those suggestions and look forward to working with BSC to approach some of the detailed aspects of those as you're digging into the details. But for this presentation, we will focus on some of the additional suggestions that the group has come together and developed recommendations for. So the specific suggestions there are: 1, to expand the criteria to cover residential projects greater than 100,000 square feet. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then secondly, It's focused on the performance whole building LCA pathway, providing absolute benchmarks or a carbon budget, which will streamline compliance of this pathway. And this could be provided in addition to the existing percent reduction thresholds or replacing depending on what BSC thinks is appropriate. So moving into forward, again, expressing support for some of the items that have already been addressed. I won't spend too much time there. When we look at the specific recommendation to bring the CCRC closer to the Buy Clean California thresholds, the AIA California Working Group recommends full alignment with Buy Clean California. I think this has been mentioned previously by other speakers, but in order to streamline compliance in the market for folks who might be required to comply with Buy Clean California and avoid confusion, aligning the two policies makes a lot of sense. And this one, again, agreeing with the reduction in the trigger threshold to 50,000 square feet. Looking into our recommendation to expand the provision to residential projects greater than 100,000 square feet. This again ties back to a general interest in aligning with other state policies around embodied carbon. We heard from some of our the colleagues at the California Air Resources Board who are working on a program focused on embodied carbon reduction, and at their workshop presented a framework that did include large residential projects as part of their program. So again, moving the CALGreen code in alignment with some of the other policies that are being developed in California. In addition to the California Air Resources Board work, there's interest at the local level. We've seen local municipalities who are looking into applying the CALGreen framework to large residential projects, multifamily projects in their jurisdictions. So in the interest of alignment, we recommend expanding the provision to these large residential projects. And finally, digging into some of the justification for developing performance benchmarks in the whole building LCA pathway. We'll use the term carbon budget here. We want to show this slide from 3 years ago, which was presented to this very group, which showed a roadmap for different code cycles. So starting with the 2022 mid-cycle and the design of the whole building LCA requirement. At the time, there was not sufficient data available to establish a maximum embodied carbon intensity for a whole building LCA. And we identified, a task for the last 3 years, 2022 through 2025, which was to gather that data, which would enable the implementation of a carbon budget or mandatory maximum performance targets for whole building LCA in this cycle. So just wanted to share that this is not new information and is part of the overall strategy for this pathway in CALGreen. And focusing on the why for this, because we know that this might seem like a leap in terms of adding complexity to the code, but in fact, it's the opposite. So we believe that adding whole building LCA performance benchmarks will in fact streamline compliance for the jurisdictions that are implementing CALGreen and for the building industry. A couple of key points there. In this approach, there's no more baseline modeling. There has been a lot of questions from the industry on defining baselines. The state and BSC has put out supplemental guidance to support accurate baselining, but under this type of approach, there would be no need for a baseline model because there would just be one model and it would be measured against a single number. So that makes it easier for the jurisdictions that are enforcing compliance to check. They just have to check one number. They don't have to worry about understanding the baseline and whether a project team might game the baseline or something like that. And in addition, it could reduce the analysis effort from the practitioner's perspective. and cut down the cost of developing a code compliant whole building LCA model, because the practitioner would be generating one model rather than a baseline model and a proposed model. And from the environmental side of things, this approach also improves certainty of achieving environmental objectives. So rather than measuring a percentage reduction, you're actually going to measure against an absolute benchmark. And you can think about this similar to energy use intensity targets, which have been in energy performance codes for many years. And briefly, we don't need to get into the data, but we want to share that the industry is ready for this type of approach. So there have been a number of research studies published in recent years, and this is just a chart that shows some of the results of that research, which are aggregating whole building LCAs produced by the market and dialing in what a reasonable benchmark could look like. In addition to reference research for setting these standards, there's also precedent for existing policies and standards that have benchmarks for whole building LCA. And there's a list here presented from Vancouver, Toronto, and in other jurisdictions internationally, as well as in green building certification standards like the Living Building Challenge. So again, don't want to suggest any numbers at the moment, but just wanted to share that there is enough information, both in policy and in research, to enable BSC to set this standard. And finally, in summary, this recommendation will streamline compliance, it will reduce the complexity of baselining, and most importantly, it will not impose additional burdens on the market. So the level that that benchmark would be set at would be in alignment with the 10% reduction that's already in the code. So we're not suggesting increasing the stringency, but just adding this numerical benchmark, which will make it easier to comply. And as a next step, the AIA California Working Group and industry suggest partnering with BSC to set performance benchmarks that are appropriate based on what we're seeing in practice today. And with that, I'll pass it to Luke Lombardi, who will cover some of the recommendations around circular economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Anish. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Luke Lombardi. I'm co-chair of the SC 2050 program and past chair of the Structural Engineers Institute of California Sustainable Design Committee. A mouthful. Yeah, and I'm here to introduce this topic of circular economy. We've been talking about embodied carbon, and the industry has been really taking on this topic, and it's brought our attention to material manufacturing and life cycle assessment. And as we've done these analyses, there's a pretty clear line drawn to resource consumption. In order to mitigate emissions, we need to use less stuff. And in order to use less stuff, we need to use our building products and our buildings for longer, as well as create systems to capture the value of those products at the end of life. And this is essentially the circular economy. Next slide, please. And so as this topic of embodied carbon has really grown in the last few years, so has circularity following it. There's been a number of policies across the country, from mandated building deconstruction in places like Boulder and San Antonio and Palo Alto, as well as design and construction guidance from places like New York City, the EDC there, mandating things like deconstruction audits for demolitions. And then thirdly, there have been some codified examples that enable circularity, such as reuse of lumber without regrading in places like the state of Washington that Maya mentioned a bit earlier. There's also a number of local municipality ordinances that require things like C&D waste, which are kind of aligned with this topic, but don't directly touch on it. Next. So that's what's going on around the country, but how does it apply to CALGreen? And I think our recommendations here, and in general, our ambition for this is a little bit it's relatively modest compared to kind of the previous sections. We're really looking to have a long view and want to build kind of a framework, build on the existing framework, and as well as set ourselves up for success in the future. And to do that, we're recommending adding definitions and then adding some clarity on the existing pathways and how circularity fits into that. So we're going to dive into each of these three next. So this topic of definitions is really important because similar to embodied carbon, there's an aspect of education, and it can be confusing. It's very easy to conflate topics like recycling and reuse. And so we see an opportunity here to establish definitions that are clear for the industry. And this has already been done in a number of places that are exhibited in the previous policies shown. So we just want to bring that to California and set ourselves up for success in the future. Next slide, please. And then, so for the prescriptive pathway, we want to make it clear that reclaimed materials can be an alternative pathway for compliance. A lot of these materials, they're reclaimed from projects, but they don't have environmental product declarations, although they are very low carbon inherently. So we want to make it clear that that is permissible. And then next, for the performance pathway, we also want to make some supplemental guidance that it is allowable to use salvage materials at a lower or discounted embodied carbon rate as well. Next. So that's the bulk of it. That's our goal. And so far as to take a step back and think about how policy and code is really kind of a way to enshrine our values. This topic of circularity we see as a very long-term and important aspect of mitigating embodied carbon into the future, and we just want to set ourselves up with clear definitions, clarity in how this can fit within the existing pathways, and supports reuse materials in the future. So with that, I'm going to hand it back, I think, to Mike. Is that right?
Great job, Luke and Anish. Wes Sullins had to drop off to another meeting. He may come back in the next minute or two, but in the meantime, I'll have to cover his part of the presentation. Those of you who have been with this effort from the beginning, remember that Wes put forward a really detailed matrix that showed various areas in CALGreen that have become really probably unnecessary to be in CALGreen, and the advantage of going back, taking a look and cleaning things up is that it will allow us to focus on the areas most ready for progress, really. And what we're talking about here is not something new. The matrix, we made progress on it in the previous code cycle. We'd like to go back, pick up where we left off, and continue that forward. And with that, that covers our 3 bullet points, and would like to stop our screen share and then open it up for any questions or comments from other members of the CALGreen Carbon Reduction Collaborative online. And thanks again for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Michael, Anish, and Luke for that presentation, and to Wes as well. It looks like we've got some hand, and before we go to comments, these are certainly some things that the BSC and the other state agencies will take into consideration. But yeah, I'll turn it back to the group.
Bob's hand is up first.
Okay. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, Bob Raymer with the residential and commercial building industries. Couple of questions from Michael regarding the proposal to expand application to residential over 100,000 square feet. Are you looking at significantly large multifamily or high-rise multifamily, or are you looking at an aggregate where if you've got a whole lot of single family homes in a project that it would apply to that. Let's say 3,000 square foot homes, you got more than 35 of them in a project. How are you looking at applying that proposal?
That's a great question, Bob. Thanks for asking that. We'd look at it the way the building department looks at it. When you have 30 homes, each one requires a separate building permit, separate physical structures. Each are dealt with by the jurisdictions independently. So our aggregation would be the same type of aggregation that is used by a building department when you have a multi-phase project or a single building where there's work occurring under different areas that can still be under one permit. So we would not expect these standards to be applied to single family homes, but to those very large, complex infill development, mixed use, high density residential, where at that square footage threshold, you do have project teams and developers that have this knowledge and experience to apply these. And we don't think they're going to have any more impact on the marketplace than the current embodied carbon measures. This requires HCD to adopt. We do have an acquisition in the process, so we think it's just really a logical next step. And we're suggesting the 100,000 to give that part of the industry a chance to catch up, just like the rest of the industry has had one code cycle to sort of get used to the idea before we get a lower number.
Okay, well, thank you. That answers my question. Thanks, Michael.
Ida?
Hi, thank you for that presentation, Michael. And whether Luke answers or you, it was questions that I have on different parts. So if I understood correctly, the GWP benchmark would be a replacement for what's existing right now, or we would retain it as an option in the LCA analysis. Is there a benefit to providing either the benchmark or the LCA as written? Or is it that you're considering a replacement?
We don't believe that it's appropriate right now to do a replacement. It's too soon. We would like to see a longer runway. So what we suggest is having this be an option. The data that allows this to even happen, you'll notice that the dates on those pieces of information are all 2024 and 2025. So it's new data. That means it's fresh and it's good data. It's really sound. But there's a lot of people that are not even aware that the data is out there. So we'd like to have a nice gradual runway, just like we've had for the current measures, so the industry is not thrown for a loop. And we think the way to do that is get the definitions in and then establish this as an optional, and it will be only for those building types where we can find quick and easy agreement on what the budgets are. If there's controversy over a budget for a particular building type, then we're just going to leave that out and let it just leave it alone for now and revisit it later. So what we're looking for is what can be done readily to get the base framework into CALGreen, have it be an option for those building types where there's easy and broad agreement, and then let the future take care of further progress.
Okay, and then thank you for that. And then my next question is the deconstruction option is also one of the embodied carbon pathways as a fourth, right? So, or is it as another one for the LCA? Does that?
We've had conversations. We think that a fourth pathway is going to add confusion and is really not necessary right now because of that's a developing thought area. So what we envision is taking the prescriptive pathway and having the use of a reuse material in lieu of an EPD. You just have the documentation that it's a reused material, which is inherently lower carbon. So it's a blended approach that would allow for this to start to get traction, start to build the circular economy, because you have to have the materials out there, you have to have the technical issues resolved, like the use of ungraded lumber. What kinds of uses can you put it to without having structural risk? There's nuances to this. So we want to, again, start with a gradual approach. So what we're talking about is get the definitions in and get the simple statement that's saying a reused material is deemed to have an acceptable EPD.
Okay, So then, if I'm to understand correctly, it is building reuse and then 2 options for the prescriptive path and then 2 options for the LCA path, whole building life cycle analysis path, correct? Essentially, if I'm looking at code structure.
Yeah, although
Okay.
although what we envision is that the EPD, the prescriptive approach, isn't really one or the other. It would be a blended approach. So if you had a project where you were reusing some lumber, you would then have EPDs potentially required for other materials that are not being reused. So it's really, it would just be like a virtual EPD submittal that this material is low carbon and thus exempt from needing an EPD because it's been documented that it's reused material. Does that make sense?
And I would just add to that, Ida, one little piece, which is there is precedent for those 2 options in Vancouver. Vancouver is very much like leading the way in some of this embodied carbon policy. And they've found that, you know, as Mike said, there's some limitations to data or like certain projects that don't fit well within certain limits. So having both options has been beneficial as that data continues to mature.
All right. Thank you. You answered my questions. I appreciate it.
Next hand raises.
Me, thank you. I just wanted to sort of jump in. Mike, thanks for the presentation. Really appreciate it. And one of the complexities of CALGreen, as you know, is that there are voluntary measures versus mandatory measures. DSA does not adopt any of the voluntary measures. And since we have, you know, BSC here at the table, I'm trying to maybe get a little bit of clarity on when you say the benchmark would be an alternative. Are you suggesting that it's within the mandatory measures, or are you suggesting that that be within the voluntary measures?
Well, I think that based on the quality of the data that already exists, it is potentially possible that it could be in the mandatory measures as an option. I think we really need to have a discussion around a table and sort out what would that language look like. What we want is we do not want to add confusion and complexity. We're really thrilled with how things have gone so far in terms of the launch of this embodied carbon mandatory measures. So getting feedback from the industry is going to be important. We think there's probably a path forward where we could have it in as an option and keep it clear and concise enough so that it's not going to add a spider web of complexity, but we definitely don't want to rock the boat so much that we lose the progress that we've already gained. I hope that it answers it. We don't have a definitive path. We do believe it is possible to integrate it as an option because really it's just a different way of approaching it's just going to affect the whole building life cycle assessment. It's just a different option as a substitute for the baseline. So I'm envisioning some language that now addresses the baseline that says that if a budget is used, and we would again agree on what building types we can agree on a budget, then you would have that option to use the budget instead of the baseline with the percentage savings. Does that answer your question?
I believe so. Yeah, I have some thoughts and definitely interested in continuing that conversation.
Did I miss anything, Anish? Okay, great. Or Luke?
Moving on. Okay, Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you. Mitchell Baker with HCD. Before we get too far away from the discussion on residential, just wanted to check in. I don't know if I heard correctly from you, Mr. Malinowski, but is the plan to submit something more substantive to HCD as a proposal related to residential occupancies?
AI California has what I believe is a still valid petition that was filed one code cycle ago that has not yet been fully responded to by HCD. So I don't believe that there's an additional step needed. But if you believe there is for HCD to consider this, we'd be happy to take that step and update the proposal. HCD hasn't adopted, and we believe if an adoption is done that limits the application to individual buildings of that square footage, it will be a way for HCD to get on board with embodied carbon reduction without disturbing the marketplace or increasing the cost or delivery ability for housing. It's really a sweet spot, we believe.
Okay, thank you. So just to be clear, the petition is the extent of the proposal from AIA. There's no additional information coming our way.
Well, again, if you believe there's a need for additional information, we'd be happy to sit down and find out what it is that you need. But there is an active petition that's been in the process now for well over a year that I don't believe got a, it's still active because it hasn't been formally responded to. So I think our thought was that that's probably enough, but again, we'll defer to the experts on the state agency side as to what's needed.
Thank you.
Any other hands raised?
Other hands? Okay. Well, thanks again to the AIA team for their presentation. We really appreciate it, and we'll continue the dialogue. Certainly, thank you. All right, so moving on in our agenda, we're pretty much going to start closing it out. We did want to talk about some next steps and future meetings. So BSC, DSA, and HCD will consider the comments and the suggestions received today. As we continue to coordinate, we are hoping to have the next CCRC workshop in the coming months. We'll probably have a time frame, a better idea of the time frame soon, but we're hoping, like I think we're kind of trying to circle around June. There's certainly no small amount of other priorities, both rulemaking, legislatively and elsewhere that the agencies are working on, but we do want to keep the group going this intervening cycle. So again, I encourage everyone to monitor and if you haven't added yourself to the mailing list for BSC, DSA, and HCD, please do so. And we'll let the folks know when the next workshop will be. I do see a hand up.
There is a hand up. Witten? You're muted. Please unmute. Thank you.
Hi, this is Maya
We can
White-Ture.
barely hear you.
Hi, this is Maya White-Ture. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Great. I just wanted to follow up on the AIA California's presentation on circularity. I work at Gruen and we do a lot of high-end retail in Beverly Hills, and those stores are refurbished like every several years, and we see so many great usable materials go to waste. So anything that can be put into CALGreen to sort of ease the reuse of those materials would be really helpful, and I think actually bring costs down and make construction easier and more affordable in California. So just wanted to, just glad we're looking at that.
Thank you.
No other hands raised.
Okay. And I wanted to kind of coming back to the timeline. So we are currently in the pre-cycle phase of the 2025 intervening code adoption cycle. And I kind of wanted to, just kind of level set for everyone. Again, we're hoping to have, 2 to 3 workshops just to discuss and focus on CCRC during this intervening cycle. Kind of reverse engineering from when, the initial submittals that the state agencies need to propose. I'll just want to lay that out for everyone. So initial submittals from BSC, DSA, and HCD would be due to the Building Standards Commission December 1st of 2025. And there's a couple months before that where the submittals would need to be finalized. We would need all the supporting rationale for the initial statement of reasons. And most critically, we would need any economic and fiscal impact cost data that would supplement the proposals. So that has to go through a very robust like review process between, you know, our agency, our departments, our oversight agency, and the Department of Finance. So kind of reverse engineering from that, the proposals that we'll develop in this intervening code cycle would need to be finalized around like September. You know, so some of the proposals that we've heard today, you know, we'll definitely take under consideration, but we kind of just wanted to, you know, set a realistic timeline for, you know, how those proposals are going to shake out. So by the next CCRC workshop that we hope to have sometime around June 2025, we'll have a clearer picture of what proposals, at least, you know, BSC, I don't want to speak for the other agencies, but I think at that point, BSC will have a good idea of what cleanup, what proposals that we can handle bandwidth wise in this cycle that we'll share with the group. But just really wanted to emphasize that, you know, kind of the nuts and bolts of how the cycle works, the requirements inherent, and the time and the associated timeline. I see, is it Bob? Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, just looking at your timeline, it looks like code advisory committees would be in like the first quarter of 2026.
That's correct. We're still working on that. You know, like which committees will be when. You know, we do have the 2025 intervening cycle timeline on our website, but you know, we're kind of depending on what the proposals look like. And as you know, Bob, we're also looking at because it's an intervening cycle, we might be forming some ad hoc committees. Yeah, we'll definitely let you and the other stakeholders know how that looks. But yeah, first quarter 2026 is when the CAC process will start. So thanks for clarifying that.
Perfect. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Mike.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to let we have quite a large attendance on this call. And those who are on the call that are interested or know people who are interested or stakeholders to comment or contribute or question the concepts that AI California put forward, we'd love to hear from you. We'd like to have as broad a working group as possible that will roll up our sleeves and put this into code actionable language. We're hoping that keep our efforts to, as Kevin noted, the timeline. We're quite well aware of the need to stay in track with that, and we're ready to do the hard work to help this move forward. But we're also looking to get the broader group between now and June. There's a lot of work that has to happen to get this down to where these are very specific and actionable proposals, and we're looking for input from any and all of those who have interest in making further progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
No other hands raised.
Okay, great. Okay, so once again, kind of moving on to agenda item 7, action items. I'll put in one final plug for those that haven't already done it to subscribe to the BSC, DSA, and HCD mailing lists from our respective websites. You can also email in comments or suggestions to the charter, whether that's just a suggested edit or addition, or if you'd like your organization to be included as you participate in the 2025 intervening cycle. We are also looking for feedback, you know, as Dave Vintner and the statewide codes and standards team spoke about earlier, any feedback or any additional resources that you'd like to add or have added to the calgreeninfo.com resource website. We're also always looking for feedback and you know, suggestions for our CalGreen guide, the worksheets, any comments or issues there. Yeah, kind of like Mike said, any kind of you know, impacts, comments, questions that you'd like to provide on any of the proposals that we've discussed today. We'd really appreciate that feedback in writing. Yeah, we'll communicate with the group on when we have a better timeline for the next workshop. And I'll pause there for any final comments or suggestions from the public before we adjourn.
No hands raised.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate it. We're glad we're able to get this group back together. Can't thank the state agencies and all the members enough for their help and interest. We look forward to talking again soon. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.